Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome in this regulatory update webinar. We are very happy to see that we have already a lot of participants joining us today, and thank you for being here and a warm welcome. You know that at be-sup it has become our tradition to provide you twice a year with an in-depth overview of all actual regulatory topics. Before we dive in, let me share you a few housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth session. Um, you can submit your questions via the Q&A tool at any time, and we will address them at the end of the presentation during the dedicated Q&A session. If you have additional questions after the meeting, please feel free to send them to us, and we will be very happy to send you an answer afterwards. And finally, very important, you know that the presentation of this webinar is recorded and that you will receive the link to the recording and also the presentation slides. Let me briefly introduce myself and my colleague for today's session. My name is Valérie Verkamme, and I'm the Director General of be-sup, and I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague Ulrike van den Houten, our be-sup Director of Communications and Regulatory Affairs. Let's go to the agenda for today. So, like always, we will start with the European topics, followed by the Belgian topics. And after the presentations, we will take the time to answer your questions during the Q&A. So let us now start with the European files, and the first file, the very important file about harmonization. Over to you, Ulrike, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Indeed, I would like to give you a short update on where we currently stand in this file and what the latest developments are and the advocacy efforts that are ongoing. But first of all, let's summarize the previous steps for those who aren't really acquainted with this file. Many of you will already know this. This work of harmonization is required under the Article 5 of the Food Supplements Directive. And this Article 5 calls for harmonized rules on the maximum levels of vitamins and minerals across the European Union. But more than 20 years later, we still don't have these harmonized levels. Now, to move the dossier forward, a task force involving several member states, including Belgium, was set up a few years ago. And at the same time, EFSA was mandated to reassess the tolerable upper intake levels, or ULs as we call them, for vitamins and minerals. And these scientific assessments are important because they form the basis for any regulatory proposal. And this work for EFSA has been finished since August 24. In the meantime, also several meetings took place throughout 24 to discuss the scientific assessments and the regulatory approach. And finally, in the beginning of 25, a draft regulatory proposal was put on the table for discussion among member states. And this draft presented the proposed methodology and the groundwork and gave concrete maximum level values for vitamins and minerals. The issue is that the proposal wasn't openly communicated towards the industry, but it leaked. And that's a pity because it is a lack of transparency, and it's one of the major concerns we also have throughout this process. Because in fact, the European Commission explicitly asked the member states not to communicate with the stakeholders during the discussion, and that makes it very difficult for industry to understand or contribute to the development of the proposal, of course. We will come back on this process, but first I will show you this table to acknowledge and show the work completed by EFSA in August of 24 to redetermine upper levels for several vitamins and minerals. And as you can see here, EFSA opinions have been published for copper, for selenium, vitamin B6, vitamin D, folic acid, manganese, vitamin E, iron, and vitamin A. Small remark for iron: due to insufficient data to define a safe level of long-term iron consumption, a maximum intake level or an upper level was not established, and instead a safe intake level was defined for various target populations for iron. You can consult, if you want, all the EFSA opinions by clicking on the links in the table, of course. And these assessments are important because they provide a scientific foundation for the future harmonized approach, and is therefore a key element in the ongoing discussions. Okay, then a few words about the EHPM model, because in parallel to the discussions at European level, EHPM, which is our European association, has been working on an alternative model for setting maximum levels. They worked on a model that was based on sound scientific methodology, based on the upper levels, on the reference intakes, and the intake of vitamins and minerals from food from important and robust national dietary surveys from the European member states. And in this model, as you see here in the table, the vitamins and minerals were divided in 3 groups, depending on the risk. So for the first group, no risks have been identified, and so no MPLs have been proposed. For the second group, with a low risk, MPLs have been proposed. And for the third group, that is a group of minerals where a higher risk is identified for particular groups, and so MPLs have also been proposed. And just to be clear, when we talk about MPLs, it is the maximum permitted level of vitamin or minerals in food supplements. So in fact, it's the highest intake determined to be safe for consumers for a long-term daily intake from food supplements. You also see that the model proposes 2 separate age categories, one for adults and one for children between 4 and 10 years old. And this reflects the fact that nutritional requirements differ between population groups, and that a one-size-fits-all approach is not scientifically appropriate. Here also you have the link to go to the work that was published by EHPM by clicking here on the link or on the picture. And this model has been presented to the authorities, to DG Santé, as well as to 6 national authorities, including Belgium. And a particularly positive development is also the alignment between EHPM and FSC, FSC being the other European Food Supplement Association. At the beginning of 2025, the 2 European organizations have worked closely together in order to speak with one voice and to present a coherent industry position. Okay, and then you might also remember that the first regulatory proposal that circulated among the member states was extremely restrictive. It was even worse than the German model, which is already considered as one of the more conservative approaches in Europe. And as a result, EHPM, be-sup, and many sister associations across Europe launched a coordinated advocacy effort. Letters were sent to members of the European Parliament, highlighting several key concerns. First, that there was no evidence of an urgent safety issue that would justify rushing the process. Second, we raised concerns about the lack of transparency of the process, as I explained before. Third, we also stressed that functioning national systems should also be taken into account when developing a harmonized European framework. We also called for a proper impact assessment, and we also highlighted the potential negative consequences for consumers if maximum levels were set too low. And following these efforts, a second and somewhat improved draft proposal was leaked, and this proposal showed some better maximum quantities for some of the nutrients, but still some low and problematic values for quite some others. And here you see the methodology that is currently being discussed in this proposal. The formula is relatively simple. It's R equals UL minus P95, and so the UL is the tolerable upper intake level as established by EFSA. And the P95 represents the nutrient intake from foods at the 95th percentile of the population. So, in fact, it reflects the intake of people with the highest dietary consumption. So, this is already a big safety margin that is built in. And then the remaining value, referred to as the R, that is what is left after subtracting food intake from the upper level. And that remainder is then split equally between food supplements and fortified foods. So it's a 50-50 split. The problem is that this approach leads to extremely low values for several important nutrients, like you see on the slide, zinc, iron, magnesium, calcium, vitamin D, and beta-carotene. And especially when we compare to the currently allowed maximum levels in Belgium under the Royal Decree, and also to the already more balanced proposal as in the common model of EHPM and FSC. And also it's worrying to see that for certain minerals, like iron, for instance, the value is 0 for children, which completely denies the special needs of adolescent girls, for instance. So our main concerns about this proposal, there are several fundamental concerns. The first is that the approach applies a single methodology to all nutrients, without conducting a real case-by-case assessment. And this appears difficult to reconcile with the existing European Court of Justice requirements. So that's a problem. Secondly, the proposed restrictions are not based on demonstrated safety concerns of real evidence of health risks. So it doesn't justify that the restrictions and prohibitions are necessary, proportionate, and that they do not go beyond what is needed to control a real safety risk. That needs to be proven, of course. Thirdly, the proposal raises questions regarding proportionality. Any restriction should be necessary, justified, and balanced, which many stakeholders believe is not the case here. Another important concern is the use of unrealistic intake assumptions, including the arbitrary 50-50 allocation between supplements and fortified foods. And this 50-50 split is not based on actual consumption data, and it doesn't reflect the distribution numbers that are declared by the member states based on available studies. So we think that it should be based more on that. The proposal also relies on an incorrect population approach, using children's data to restrict products intended for adults, which the law and the European Court of Justice do not permit. And also important to know is that maximum levels set for children aged 3 to 10 are also being applied to adolescents up to 18 years old, for instance, despite the higher nutritional needs during growth and development. Although EFSA itself recognizes adolescents and different age categories for children in separate groups with distinct requirements, but this is not at all reflected in the proposal that we received. Then the proposal doesn't sufficiently consider the total dietary intake or the real-life consumption patterns, and the impact of this worst case scenario proposal also on vulnerable groups like pregnant women, older people, or people with specific medical needs has not been considered. And then finally, there is a risk of creating significant barriers within the internal market, and that can reduce product availability and limit consumer choices across Europe, which is also an important problem. So now let's pass on the latest developments. Last year, a broad stakeholder alliance has been formed, bringing together different associations like Food Drink Europe, Specialized Nutrition Europe, EHPM, of course, our European Association, Food Supplements Europe, and also ASGP. And the objective is very simple. It is to speak with one strong voice on the issue of the maximum levels. So the stakeholder alliance went broader than only HPM and Food Supplements Europe, which is a good thing. And several joint position papers and letters have already been issued and shared with the European Commission and national authorities. And the latest development dates from the 4th of June, when this alliance sent a joint letter to the cabinet of Commissioner Varelli. And this letter highlights concerns regarding legal infringements and European case law, and it reiterates the sector's concerns on the methodology currently considered by the Commission. Now, we don't immediately expect great progress from the European Commission. They confirmed that a second model remains on the table, but that discussions are still considered premature. And during the most recent working group meeting on the harmonization of maximum levels, the Commission would also have indicated that this file is currently not a political priority, and also budgetary constraints are limiting the progress on the initiative. So at this stage, a stakeholder consultation is expected during the third quarter of this year, while the adoption of a future regulation is currently foreseen for the first quarter of 28. So the dossier remains active, but not a priority, and the overall timeline appears to have shifted compared to earlier expectations. In this little table here, you also see in the timeline the publication of an economic impact assessment. So I will also briefly update you on this really important step, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the industry's concerns was that the European Commission doesn't want to conduct an impact assessment. But since for our industry, it is of great importance to show how these proposed limits could affect our sector and the access to food supplements, so EHPM and FSC decided to jointly conduct such a study to evaluate the economic consequences of potential European maximum levels for both food supplements and fortified foods. The study is currently being finalized with an external partner, and the results are expected around the same time as the stakeholder consultation later on this year. For be-sup, it's also essential that in this economic impact assessment, the Belgian market is properly represented. The more Belgian companies that participate, well, the better the assessment will reflect the reality of our national markets and the potential impact of future European decisions. And at the moment, the participation from Belgium remains extremely limited, with only one confirmed company involved so far. So therefore, we strongly encourage interested companies to still take part in the study. And if you would like more information on that, we invite you to contact Valerie for this. So thank you. That was it on this topic. And of course, we will continue to keep our members informed as this important dossier will evolve certainly in the coming times.
So thank you very much, Ulrike. Over to the next big file on the European files, the update on Article 8 and the report of the heads of agencies. So let me give you a clear and comprehensive state of play this afternoon. Before we go into the details, one piece of advice. Whenever you see or you hear Article 8, this should immediately raise a red flag. it means that the ingredients concerned has officially entered a safety procedure and that regulatory action may follow. So, and the actions can range from additional restrictions to a complete ban, as we will see in the files that we will go through together. So Article 8 should really be an early warning system for you. For companies, this means that you should closely monitor the file and also consider potential impacts in your strategic planning, in your product portfolio, and even in your innovation decisions. When an article falls under Article 8, it's really a signal. It's a signal that the rules might change. So, with that in mind, let us start with the explanation. Just a reminder, what is Article 8? Article 8 is Article 8 from the Regulation 1925-2006. It's essentially a safety procedure that can be triggered whenever safety concerns arise around a specific ingredient. The procedure can be initiated either by a member state or directly by the Commission itself. And once Article 8 is activated, there are three possible regulatory options for the ingredients. It can be banned, then it is moved to Part A of Annex 3 of the Regulation 1925-2006. The ingredient can be restricted, for example, through the establishment of maximum levels. Sometimes also warnings have to be added on the label. And in that case, the ingredient falls under Part B of Annex 3 of the regulation, or the ingredient can be placed under scrutiny, which is Part C of Annex 3. And in that case, industry has 24 months to submit scientific data demonstrating the ingredient safety. After this period, the European Commission must take a final decision within 4 years after publication of the first regulation. And the outcome is either an authorization, a restriction, or a ban. With this framework in mind, let's take a look on the different Article 8 files now together. So those are the ingredients where Article 8 has been activated. Let's go to the first one, hydroxyanthracene derivatives. I think it's the most complex Article 8 case, and it has been ongoing since 2021. As you know, the European Commission adopted Regulation 2021/468 in March 2021, banning some botanicals and the preparations of those botanicals and placing other botanicals and preparations under scrutiny. You can see the different botanicals and the exact wording on the screen. However, you know that there was a court case, and this changed the situation. So the General Court of the European Commission pronounced the annulment of that decision following our be-sup Sinadiet court case, together with three other court cases of three individual companies. But the story was not over yet. The European Commission appealed, and this appeal leads to the suspension of the annulment. So in practice, this means that technically the ban remains into force until the Court of Justice will pronounce its final appeal judgment, and this is expected in December of this year. Recently, in the month of April, we received some concerning news from the European Commission. Until then, the Commission had always said that she did not intend to launch the new ban before the appeal judgment that is expected at the end of the year. In April of this year, the Commission published a draft proposal to propose a ban of the preparations of botanical substances that have been under scrutiny. So this is worrying and also a quite strange situation, as we are expecting the appeal judgments in December. So in the meantime, the European Commission has also told member states that they still can restrict products bans based on the EFSA opinion. So in fact, you have a de facto prohibition. For example, in Belgium, you cannot notify products containing more than 1 ppm of HADs. And the Food Safety Agency, FAVV, AFSCA, even started with the withdrawal of some products containing more than 1 ppm HADs. Over to monacolins. The current maximum level of less than 3 milligrams per day had been in place since June 2022, along with mandatory warnings on the label. At the same time, monacolins were placed under scrutiny for 24 months, meaning that the industry was required to submit safety data. There was a large EHPM project that was carried out with several companies, amongst them members of be-sup, and in 2025, EFSA published its negative opinion. On the Standing Committee of the 13th of May, a qualified majority was reached in favor of a full ban of monacolins. However, the European Commission is willing to grant 12 months transition periods. Products that will have been placed on the market before the entry into force of the regulation, which will occur 20 days after publication, may remain 12 months on the market. So for your facility, we are glad to share a timeline with you, so it will be useful for you in your strategic planning. So the ban has been voted. There was a qualified majority for the ban. Now the public consultation starts. So the European Parliament and the European Council will have 3 months to make objections. Within EHPM, we will contact some MEPs, some European members of parliament, to raise objections to try to change things. Normally, the text is expected, the publication of the text is expected in the third quarter of this year, and the entry into force is always 20 days after publication in the official journal. So if you then add the transition period of 12 months, this means that the full ban will be effective at earliest in October or November 2027. This was about monacolins. Over to green teas. Green tea extracts containing EGCG. These extracts have been restricted since 2022, with a maximum intake of 800 milligrams of EGCG per day and several label warnings that you can read on the screen. And there is also the exclusion for aqueous green tea extracts. At the same time, you had the restriction, but at the same time, green tea was placed under scrutiny. The problem is that no safety data had been submitted during those 24 months of scrutiny periods. And as a result, the European Commission has indicated that she intends to ban green tea extracts containing EGCG. EHPM, our European Association, contacted the European Commission to raise the fact that a ban would be really totally disproportionate and even challengeable at a legal level. And besides that, banning EGCG in green tea would also be totally in contradiction with the authorized novel food dossier, where a level of 300 milligrams of EGCG per day has been estimated as safe. So now we are aware that the European Commission is in contact with EFSA to clarify safety levels, and a decision should follow before the end of the year, before 19th of December 2026, to be more precise. We will, of course, keep you posted via the monthly update. Next Article 8 file is the one about alpha lipoic acids. Um, you remember that this procedure was initiated by Denmark following EFSA's 2021 advice, which concluded that no safe dose could be established due to extremely rare cases of IAS, the insulin autoimmune syndrome. The Commission initially intended to place alpha lipoic acids directly in Part A of the regulation, meaning to ban ALA. However, more recent indications suggest a shift towards two new options on the table. So, placing ALA under restriction and warnings, or the full ban, which would be still the preferred option of a number of member states. But the Commission is more inclined to choose for the restrictions with additional warnings, so which is a positive outcome for this file. Next, sweet and bitter fennel. This Article 8 was triggered by Germany, and the EFSA assessment is still ongoing. It has now been postponed for 3 times, and the new deadline is November 2026. Let's move on with botanicals containing hydroxycitric acid, HCA. This Article 8 procedure was initiated by Spain, and EFSA's assessment is still ongoing. The public consultation has been extended until the 10th of July, following the demand of our European Association EHPM. You know that in France, the authorities had already suspended the use of Garcinia based on a negative opinion of the French safety authority ANSES. And very recently, the ban, no, the suspension, sorry, had been prolonged for 1 more year. In Belgium, we have a negative advice from the Belgian Advisory Commission for Plants too. This means that for new products containing Garcinia, they will no longer be accepted at notification. But for products on the market, no withdrawals are expected before the Royal Decree on Plants will be amended with this new advice. And then the last Article 8 file, berberine. So the berberine Article 8 procedure has been initiated by France. In March of this year, EFSA published its draft opinion. And the draft opinion is not only covering berberine, but also 14 other plants sources containing berberine. The consultation process of the stakeholders has started, and the deadline on demand of our European Association EHPM had has been extended until the 10th of July. You know that with EHPM we are preparing to submit a safety dossier. The next steps is that the final EFSA opinion is expected end of this year. So these Article 8 files show really that it is important for companies to early monitor and anticipate and to be able to make the right strategic choice. So it's very important to follow up every update that you receive from be-sup for those files. Let's now start with the reports of the heads of agencies. The heads of agencies are, in fact, the heads of the safety agencies of the European member states. For Belgium, it's a little bit different, as it's the Ministry of Health, the SPF Santé Publique, the Volksgezondheid, that is participating in the heads of agencies, and not the Food Safety Agency, FAVV-AFSCA. So the purpose of the work of the heads of agency was to assess a broad range of substances used in food supplements, looking at both their safety profile and their regulatory status across Europe. Um, the heads of agencies identified 12 substances that were identified as priority substance, and you can see the list on the screen, and it includes several well-known and well-used botanicals such as curcuma, Hypericum perforatum, maca, and also ashwagandha. So what is the state of place at this moment? So in June 2026, you must know that the European Commission has not yet triggered Article 8 for those substances. However, the Commission asked EFSA to carry out a preliminary review, and EFSA in turn questions and asks clarifications to the German and the Dutch authorities who have the lead in this dossier. So this is a little bit the state of play of the heads of agency report. So yeah, our tip for our members, be cautious with these ingredients, especially for new product developments, and also monitor their regulatory status closely in the coming months, as this can be important for you. So over to Ulrike for a state of play on PPWR.
Indeed, another dossier that continues to have a really significant impact on our sector. So I will give you an update also on the latest developments and the advocacy actions in this file. I think in the meantime, everyone is aware of the challenges of PPWR for our sector. So we will not repeat everything, but rather focus on the important topics for now. So just as a quick reminder, the PPWR entered into force in February 25, will become applicable from 12 August 26, so in 2 months. And it replaces the previous packaging directive, and it introduces directly applicable rules across all the member states. So recently, on the 30th of March of this year, the European Commission published 2 important documents in addition of the PPWR, a guidance document and an accompanying FAQ. You have the links to the documents in the slide also. The purpose of these publications is to support a more uniform implementation of the PPWR across Europe, and to provide practical clarification for both companies and national authorities. This is very important because many companies have been struggling with uncertainties regarding their future obligations and responsibilities under the regulation. And these guidance documents, they do not change the legislation itself, but they aim to provide insights into how the Commission is currently interpreting these rules and how it expects them to be applied in practice. But unfortunately, many things maintain uncertain despite these documents, and many questions stay unanswered. Now, first, the key takeaways from the guidance. It confirms several important points that are really relevant for our sector. First of all, the Commission confirms that the brand owner will very often be considered the manufacturer under the PPW, even when the packaging production is completely outsourced. But we will come back on that later more in detail. The guidance also confirms that all packaging will need to become recyclable, but the design for recycling requirements will only become applicable from 2030. We don't know them yet. Minimum recycled content targets will apply to plastic packaging, although certain exemptions may be possible where food contact safety cannot be guaranteed. Then packaging minimization will become mandatory, meaning that unnecessary packaging and excessive empty space must be avoided or reduced. The guidance also confirms the strict PFAS restrictions that will apply from August 26. We come back on that later too. And it also confirms the future introduction of harmonized EU labeling requirements by 28. Another important clarification concerns the definition of packaging itself. The scope is very broad and it includes not only the bottles, the jars or the blisters, but also the lids, the labels, the scoops, the closures and secondary packaging. So the key message is very clear. PPWR affects really the entire packaging chain and not only the primary packaging components. Now, one of the most useful practical clarifications of these documents concerns the concept of a packaging type and the future declaration of conformity requirements. Not everything is clear yet, but at least the packaging, the definition of what a packaging is more clear now. So according to the Commission, a packaging type is defined as a specific combination of packaging components. So, for example, a particular jar with a specific lid and a label would constitute one packaging type. This is important because in that way, a single declaration of conformity can cover multiple products that use exactly this same packaging configuration. And this, of course, has some benefits for companies because it reduces the administrative burden and it makes the compliance management more practical for companies with larger product ranges. Now, we advise the companies to start mapping their packaging configurations as soon as possible, if it's not done yet, because the declaration of conformity requirement will apply from 12 August 26, even if there are still a lot of question marks about the content. Then one of the questions we receive most frequently is who is actually responsible under PPWR. The Commission guidance provides a clearer answer now, even if some interpretation questions remain. But in most situations, the manufacturer under PPWR will be the brand owner or the company that defines the packaging specifications. And this remains true even if packaging production is outsourced. So the manufacturer is the one who is responsible for ensuring PPWR compliance, preparing the declaration of conformity, and meeting sustainability and labeling obligations. Of course, the manufacturer will need a lot of information and certifications from his different suppliers. Then the producer, on the other hand, is the economic operator. You see the wrong slide. Okay, yeah, it's this one. I'm sorry. So the producer, on the other hand, this one is the economic operator who makes the packaging available for the first time on the territory of the member state where the packaging is expected to become waste, whether it is the manufacturer, the importer, or the distributor. And this producer is responsible for the extended producer responsibility, also called EPR. You hear talking about that also. This means that the producer is responsible for financing waste management and complying with national reporting obligations in the member states where the packaging becomes waste. Now, there is a limited exception for micro enterprises being manufacturers, but this only applies under specific conditions. So a micro enterprise is an enterprise with fewer than 10 employees and less than 2 million turnover. And a condition is that a packaging supplier must be located in the same member states. Then a major PPWR requirement that will soon become applicable as from the 12th of August also is the new PFAS restriction on food contact packaging. And the Commission does not make a difference between intentionally added or unintentionally added PFAS. But at the same time, they say in their guidance and FAQ that preliminary PFAS laboratory analysis they show that these analyses are done on a number of selected packagings, and these results show that in practice only packaging where PFAS has been intentionally added would give results above the PFAS limit values. So as I said, the deadline is the 12th of August, and important, there is no transition period for newly placed packaging. Newly placed on the market. An important clarification from the Commission is that packaging already placed on the market before that date may continue to be sold, and therefore the date of placing on the market becomes legally decisive. And the legal definition of placing on the market is when there is a transfer of ownership or possession. However, significant challenges remain, and one of the biggest issues is that there is still no harmonized EU test method available. And to address this problem, the Commission has proposed in their newly published documents a stepwise testing approach. And this starts with a total fluorine screening in the first step. So if levels remain below the regulatory threshold of 50 milligram per kilogram, packaging can be considered compliant to the PFAS restrictions. If total fluorine is above the threshold of 50 milligram per kilogram, then methods such as pyrolysis GCMS can be used to confirm whether the fluorine is organic or inorganic, and that's then in the second step. And if the organic fluorine is below 50 milligram per kilogram, then the sample can be considered compliant. But if the organic fluorine is above 50 milligram per kilogram, then a direct top analysis is recommended to check compliance with the 25 micrograms per kilogram or 250 micrograms per kilogram concentration limit in a third step of this approach. The Commission also adds that on the basis of the evidence currently available, all samples compliant with test 1 are also compliant with tests 2 and 3. So this is a three-step approach that is not legally binding, but rather an enforcement approach recommended by the European Commission until a harmonized EU testing method becomes available. For the industry, this creates uncertainty regarding testing methodologies, supplier documentation, and compliance verification. And at the same time, the implementation deadline is approaching rapidly. So it still gives a lot of uncertainties. But our recommendation remains clear. Companies should already start discussions with their packaging suppliers and request explicit PFAS compliance documentation. Now, some information about our advocacy actions. The PPWR, we really feel that it has now entered in what we consider a critical phase. The deadlines are approaching, and on several topics, there's still no clear information available yet. several major European cross-sector organizations, including Food Drink Europe, they are quite reluctant to reopen discussions on the regulation because they fear that there might be regulatory uncertainty or unintended broader consequences. You know, if you open the box, you don't know what will come out. But at the same time, significant challenges continue to exist for our sector. And in particular, concerns regarding the August 26th deadline, the PFAS compliance obligations, as we saw before, the declaration of conformity requirements, and packaging formats such as blisters with high barrier needs. So for these and also for other packaging formats, the key concern is that viable recyclable alternatives are still not available. And we hear from packaging suppliers who we are in contact with that there are projects and there is the hope that to have some new materials with higher barriers by the end of this year or beginning of 27. But then tests will have to be conducted, production chains will need to be adapted, and stability tests will have to be started for a period of mostly 3 years. So the recyclability deadline of 2030 will certainly not be achievable if you look at this timeline. So meeting the future design for recycling performance requirements by 2030 remains really difficult for several packaging applications used in our industry. And as a result, there is a growing recognition that additional dialogue with policymakers is needed to ensure workable implementation. And to address and in response to all these challenges, we do a lot of advocacy efforts with EHPM, and EHPM has established a dedicated PPWR task force, and I'm very pleased to mention that this task force is chaired by be-sup and by Valerie, more precisely, since Belgium has been working on this file since 2 years now and also launched its proper working group already at the end of 24. And together with EHPM and other national associations, the task force and partners such as UNESDA, that's the soft drink association, HPM managed to do a coordinated high-level advocacy initiative in May recently. And the strategy that was used here was focused on engaging directly with the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council through a CEO-level approach. So this was a letter that was signed by CEOs of different important companies. And this is an important action because it broadens the coalition beyond the food supplement sector and it increases political visibility and impact. Also, it was a way to avoid direct conflict with other associations' current positions. And in this letter, we are asking for realistic implementation, technical feasibility, and workable solutions. Then furthermore, this week, the EHPM task force is also finalizing the sector position paper. And the objective of this position paper is not to challenge the ambitions of the PPWR. On the contrary, the industry fully supports the objectives, but at the same time, we want realistic implementation conditions. And our priorities, they focus on achieving greater clarity around the PFAS compliance, feasible recyclability requirements, workable packaging solutions, and also sufficient transition periods where necessary. And to support this important work, EHPM has also launched a new PPWR survey, and we strongly encourage companies to participate. The stronger our evidence base, the stronger our position in future discussions with policymakers. So you have the link to complete the survey in the presentation, but the remaining time is very limited because the objective of the task force is to meet with the European Commission still before summer. So we invite you to do it very quickly. And we will, of course, keep you informed on the outcome of that meeting. So what can we expect in the coming months? Well, several important implementing acts are still expected, like in August, additional rules on harmonized labeling and digital labeling systems should be published. And then by the end of 26, we also expect further clarification regarding recycled content methodologies and sustainability criteria. And in the meantime, as I already told you, HPM and be-sup continue to identify implementation challenges, gaps, inconsistencies. So please, there also do not hesitate to send us your questions or comments at info@be-sup.be if you have specific questions, because then we will engage with the European Commission also on all these questions and uncertainties left for the companies. So yes, we will engage with the Commission and policymakers, and we will advocate for realistic timelines and workable solutions. And we must say that we are not the only ones. We see that there is a lot moving lately, and that the political debate surrounding the PPWR is highly dynamic at the moment. For instance, also the Czech Republic, supported by several stakeholders and national organizations, has called for a postponement of certain PPWR obligations due to legal uncertainty, yes, implementation costs that are involved, and absence of essential implementation guidance. And also recently, companies, industry associations, chambers of commerce, local authorities from several member states have also called for a postponement of at least 24 months, as well as further clarification of various provisions. Now, it is becoming increasingly apparent that not all the necessary guidance documents, the technical methodologies and implementing measures will be available before the 12th of August, and the European Commission would also have confirmed that they are not able to bring additional clarification before the implementation date of the 12th of August 26. So now is really the time to continue our efforts. All this shows this. It is moving, things are happening, and it's time to continue our efforts and advocate for clear information, realistic timelines, and workable solutions. Now, for the companies, of course, we do recommend to start preparing now, even if important challenges and uncertainties remain. And this preparation should include reviewing the packaging portfolios, as I mentioned, engaging with the suppliers, preparing compliance documentation, and carrying out PFAS risk assessments. So over to you again, Valerie, for the next topic.
Thank you, Ulrike, for those explanations about PPWR. Let's move on with the last European file, at least, the file of MOSH/MOA, the contaminants file. MOSH/MOA, the mineral oil hydrocarbons, on the 13th of May, member states have approved the European Commission's proposal on MOSH and MOA during the meeting of the Standing Committee with member states and European Commission. This means that for the first time, we will have a harmonized European framework specifically addressing these contaminants in food, including food supplements, of course. The key message is that the European approach clearly makes a distinction between MOA and MOSH. Let's look into detail to the different proposals that have been presented, and we have read the draft texts. So For the mineral oil aromatics hydrocarbons, for the MOA, EFSA considers the main toxicological concern because certain fractions may be genotoxic and carcinogenic. And legally binding maximum levels will apply for food supplements, and you can see them on my screen. The limit will be set at 10 milligrams per kilogram from the 1st of January next year, so from the 1st of January 2027. And then the maximum level will be further reduced to 5 milligrams per kilogram from the 1st of January 2030. For MOSH, on the right part of the screen, so the mineral oil saturated hydrocarbons, the situation is different. So EFSA concluded that current dietary exposure that does not raise direct health concern, although the margin of safety remains limited. So as a result, the European Commission has opted for monitoring rather than setting maximum limits. For food supplements, there is an indicative level of 15 milligrams per kilo that will be used. It's an indicative level, so exceeding the level does not automatically mean that your product will be considered as non-compliant, but it might trigger investigations into possible contamination sources. So the limits for MOA and then the indicative level for MOSH. What was also decided on the 30th of May were analytical requirements. So laboratories analyzing food supplements will need to achieve a limit of quantification of less than 5 milligram per kilo for both MOA and MOSH. And in addition, sampling and analysis will have to follow the methodology described by the GRC, so the Joint Research Center, the JRC. We put you the link to the JRC guidance for those of you who are not acquainted with it. So finally, we have a call for our members, and we would really appreciate your feedback. If you identify elevated MOA or MOSH levels during testing, please inform us confidentially. It's very important because this information will help us to identify common challenges across the sector and support our discussions with the Belgian and the European authorities. So it's important for us to be aware if these levels are workable or not. And we will continue, of course, to monitor the implementation of these measures and keep you informed of any further developments. This was so those were the European files. Let's move on with the Belgian files. And I give the hand to Ulrike for the first Belgian file, news from the Belgian Plant Commission.
Indeed, I will give you an overview of some recent new advices that have been published by the Belgian Plant Commission. So the first one summarizes on this slide summarizes the changes regarding Aesculus hippocastanum or horse chestnut in food supplements. Firstly, the analytical method has been updated. So the photometric method is being replaced, according to changes also in the European Pharmacopoeia, by a more accurate HPLC method for the determination of glycosidic triterpenes. And secondly, a new analytical parameter has been introduced. So from now on, in this new method, the proto-isogenin is measured as a marker for glycosidic triterpenes of the isin type. And 21 milligram of proto-isogenin is considered equivalent to 50 milligrams of isin. And as a result, in notification files, So analysis reports will need to clearly indicate both the analytical methods used and the parameter measured. They also reformulated the maximum daily dose. The condition is now expressed in terms of protoisogenine rather than isin, but the practical outcome remains unchanged. So the recommended daily intake must not result in a consumption exceeding 32 milligrams of protoisogenine per day. And before it was 50 milligrams of isin, I believe. And also remember the requirement to make batch analysis results available for each production batch, because this remains fully applicable in case of controls you need to be able to show them. So when do these opinions enter into force? Well, the opinions of the Plant Commission are published, but they become legally enforceable once they have been incorporated into an updated version of the Royal Decree on Plants. But the FPS is already taking these opinions into account during the notification procedure for new food supplements. So therefore, although they are not yet part of the legislation, companies should already take them into account in practice. However, if there are inspections by FAWW-AFSCA, it of course remains possible to point out that these conditions have not yet been incorporated into the legislation. So in theory, they are not yet legally binding. Okay, then the second one concerns Hypericum perforatum, or St. John's wort. For Hypericum, the hyperforin content must now be declared on top of the hypericin content, which was an obligation before. And thanks to the be-sup intervention, this maximum dosage has been set on a reasonable limit and a reasonable proportion with hypericin. So concretely, the recommended daily dose must not lead to an intake that exceeds 700 micrograms of hypericin and 7 milligram of hyperforin. And to demonstrate compliance, the levels of both compounds must be determined in advance and documented through appropriate analytical testing. The analysis report must be included in the product notification dossier, and also the batch-specific analytical results must be held available for each production batch in case of control. And in addition, also the amount of hyperforin per daily dose must clearly be indicated on the product label. And then a specific warning statement is also required, advising consumers to consult their doctor or pharmacists if they are taking medication. And that's, of course, due to the well-known interaction potential of St. John's wort with a range of medicinal products. About the entry into force, well, it's the same as for Aesculus. The requirements are not yet formally incorporated into the legislation, and they will become legally binding once included in the revised version of the Royal Decree. But here also the FPS Public Health is already applying these criteria when you ask for notifications of new food supplements. So therefore, you should already take these requirements into account as from now. Then other changes that will be published in the new Royal Decree on plants concern maca and bamboo. The first one, maca or Lepidium meyeni, there the Plant Commission has proposed a significant relaxation regarding the alkaloids. As we anticipated, the draft version with requirements of a complete absence of alkaloids is expected to be replaced by maximum permitted levels for specific alkaloids. And this really represents a pragmatic and a scientifically justified approach that provides greater legal certainty and feasibility for the operators. And this position is also consistent with recent scientific findings, including the work of Professor Nina Hermans and her research group at the University of Antwerp, which has contributed significantly to the understanding of maca alkaloids and their safety profile. And then the second development concerns bamboo or the bambusa species. So in the draft royal decree, it was first stated that scientific evidence had to be provided to demonstrate that the cyanogenic glycosides in raw bamboo had been sufficiently destroyed. But be-sup pointed out the lack of a clear definition for sufficient evidence, which could create legal uncertainty. So the working group of the Plant Commission has now clarified what is considered acceptable evidence, and they reported that compliance can be demonstrated either by showing that the bamboo had been cooked for at least 20 minutes to reduce the cyanogenic glycosides, or by providing analytical results that show that residual cyanide levels remain below the established threshold of 1 milligram, or 0.5 milligram for children under 12 years old. And in this last case, the analysis method mentioned in the table of FOD-SPF, their table concerning recommended analysis methods, can be used for this analysis. And in addition, fermentation methods may also be accepted, provided that their effectiveness is supported by relevant scientific literature. And then a last relaxation planned is for the isoflavones. So from now on, there only the content of the main isoflavone will have to be declared. For soy-based products, this means that companies will no longer be required to declare the combined amount of genistein, dietzein, and glycitein, and instead only the genistein content will need to be reported. So this adjustment should make compliance and analytical testing more practical. In practice, the existing analytical methods are often easier when they are applied to a single marker compound rather than to a group of related substances. And a further improvement for the future version of the Royal Decree concerns the way maximum levels will be expressed in this revision of the Royal Decree. So rather than referring to maximum limits to groups of substances, specific substances will be mentioned, and this will provide greater certainty and make it much clearer for our members. So over to you again, Valerie.
Thank you, Ulrike. Let's now look at the file on the obligation to use German on labels when your products are sold in the German-speaking region of Belgium. So we have good news to share with you. I think that everybody is aware now. So thanks to our advocacy, the tolerance period has again been prolonged until the end of this legislative term. Well, in Belgium, you never know when the government is going to fall, but normally until the end of 2029. So just a very quick summary. So the obligation to use German is not a new obligation. In fact, it's a very old one, and it's linked to the use to the language law that already dates from January 1977, that stated that all mandatory information must be provided at least in the language of the region where the product is sold. So in practice, if you sell a product in the Brussels region, it's a bilingual region. The label should be in French and Dutch. If you only sell in Flanders, but then it will be at least available in Dutch, French in Wallonia, except in the German-speaking community. And what is the German-speaking community? Well, you see, it's in fact 9 municipalities that you see here on the screen where the official language is German. So for years, in fact, there was a gap in the legislation due to an error during the transposition of the European Food Information to Consumers Directive. there was an error, and which made enforcement for the Food Safety Agency impossible. And that loophole was closed in September 2022 when a correction law was published. Thanks to the joint advocacy of be-sup, but also with the support of the food industry, FEVIA, and also the retailers industry, Comeos, we were able to obtain the extension of the tolerance period until the end of 2029. So this will be one of the longest tolerance periods in this domain, I believe. What will happen after the tolerance period? Well, after the tolerance period, the Food Safety Agency will resume the controls. And so let us be very clear, if you sell food supplements in one of the 9 German-speaking cities of the German-speaking region, your label will at least have to be in German. What are the risks? If your label would not be in German, this will not lead to recalls, as for sure there is no food safety issue, but you will get a fine and a withdrawal would be possible. So what do we recommend to our members? Even with the extension of the tolerance period, we really recommend to prepare your labels if you sell products in the German speaking region. This is really important to ensure that you are ready to be compliant. Of course, we are very well aware of the difficulties that the use of German is creating, and we have small labels on many food supplements. We have a lot of requirements to put on the label. In Belgium, you have, if you want to sell over all Belgium, you have the 3 languages. So we are continuing to monitor the file and also to try looking for some more structural solutions, because now it's very good that thanks to our advocacy we obtained that tolerance period, which will allow you more time to be compliant, but it's not a structural solution. So we are continuing to looking for solutions. We believe that, well, at European level, we see a growing openness towards digital labeling. At this moment, the cabinet of the minister in charge, Minister Calaranval, said that this is not a legally accepted solution, but things are changing and evolving. We are also in contact with the other cabinet ministers in Belgium responsible for consumers affairs, like Beenders and Minister van den Broeke of Health. And we are even thinking of exploring the possibility to launch a Belgian pilot project. So we will keep you informed, of course, if there is an evolution in this file. But the good news is that we obtained that tolerance period for you. So over to Ulrike.
Yes, I will inform you about this file. I think we already informed you about this problem for our industry with displaying the price per unit, which is obligatory at the moment in kilogram or liter for food supplements, and which is problematic. First, a little bit of context. The indication of price per unit is a legal obligation. And last year it was highlighted during an inspection at one of our be-sup members. The Belgian Ministry of Economy conducted a control of a company's website, and they flagged an infringement of the law. The reason was that the website didn't display the price per kilo for the food supplements displayed. And displaying this price per kilo is a requirement that is based on the Royal Decree of 30 June 1996, and specifically under Article 6, which states that any seller who offers products for sale to consumer must, in addition to the sale price, indicate the unit price. And this applies to both sales in shops and online sales to consumer. And the decree also specifies that this unit price must be expressed in kilograms or liters. So no other possibilities, only these ones. And yeah, the core issue is that food supplements are legally classified as food, and there is currently no derogation for this category under the decree. But it doesn't make sense because a food supplement typically weighs between 200 milligram and 1.25 grams. So indicating a price per kilo results in disproportionate figures and also misleading information that doesn't help the consumer to make informed choices. If you take an example, a box of 90 capsules with of 450 milligram each, which costs 40 euro per box, then the price per kilo would almost be 1,000 euros. So that would be a little strange to display. In practice, also, the sector mostly applies, of course, a price per box or also per intake unit in alternative to the price per kilo or liter. So a price per capsule or per tablet, for instance, because this is more transparent and more practical. So with the support of Comeos, which is the Belgian Federation for Commerce and Services, and they also represent the supermarkets, we decided to formally submit a request for derogation to the ministers Clarenval and Beenders. Because we found a legal basis for this derogation, which lies in Article 1 of the Royal Decree and which allows alternative units if commonly used in the market. And our proposed alternative then was the price per intake unit instead of the price per kilogram. So following our derogation request, a meeting was held on the 6th of November last year with the different cabinets and the FPS economy. And during that meeting, the FPS economy, they acknowledged that the rule is outdated and difficult to apply, surely for food supplements, and that also they told us that controls on unit pricing started only recently, and that's why in the past this had never been an issue, because this is not a new law, but it was never brought at our attention. Both the cabinets expressed their understanding and openness to adapting the law in this way, and there is a legal feasibility because the derogation is legally possible after consultation with the Consumer Council. And we also found a precedent because for spices the price may be indicated per 100 gram instead of per kilogram. But the problem is that the current Belgian framework doesn't allow pricing to be communicated per intake unit. It is not a metrological amount. It's not like kilo or liters. Then in January of this year, the three ministers formally supported our request and asked advice to the Consumer Council. It's called BRC, Bijzondere Raadgevende Commissie Verbruik, in Dutch, and CCI, la Commission Consultative Spéciale Consommation en français. And then in March, we received the opinion of the Consumer Council, and they formally acknowledged that the current pricing rules are not well suited to food supplements. Unlike conventional food products, food supplements are generally not consumed in the same way. They are consumed in defined servings rather than by weight or volume as food products. But as I already said, they confirmed that the current Belgian framework does not allow pricing to be communicated per serving unit. They also highlighted that European legislation provides greater flexibility in this area. So it's a Belgian problem because under the Directive 98/6, member states may allow alternative units of measurement where these are commonly and customarily used for specific products. And for food supplements, a price per serving would often be more meaningful and easier for consumers to understand than a price per kilogram or liter. That's what they say. The Council also noted that the current rules may create confusion and do not always reflect how products are marketed in practice, because manufacturers, retailers, and online pharmacies, well, they typically communicate prices per pack and or per serving unit. And they also saw that several other European countries have already adopted a similar approach. So as a result, the Consumer Council recommends exploring how a price per serving unit system could be incorporated into the Belgian legislation in the medium term, because it needs an adaptation of the law, so it can't be done right away. But such an approach would better reflect the market reality and consumer expectations. So that is from our sector's perspective, a very positive evolution. But as this is, as I said, a medium-term solution, be-sup has emphasized the importance of ensuring sufficient transition time and legal certainty while the legislative review is ongoing. So we requested that any shortcomings identified under the current framework should primarily be addressed through guidance, awareness raising, and dialogue rather than through sanctions. But we will keep you informed of the next evolutions on this file also. And then I pass the word back to Valerie for the following topic.
Thank you, Ulrike. So, and do not hesitate also to inform us if you recently had controls about the question of the price per unit, because it's very important that we are aware, and also how the controlling authorities reacted, because they know that be-sup is actively working on this file. So I will present you some very fresh figures that we received. In fact, during our last meeting with the Belgian authorities, we received the first figures about Nutrivigilance in 2025. You know that Nutrivigilance has been into force since February 2024, and we already shared information with you about the first report of 2024. By the way, if you want very good information and a complete information on Nutrivigilance, you know that for be-sup members, we organized already a webinar on Nutrivigilance, and you can still look at the replay. It was recorded on my be-sup. But back to the new report of 2025. First, the report contains figures on who reports the adverse events. So, as you see on the graph, the vast majority of reports come directly from operators, who account for 89% of all notifications. Healthcare professionals represent 6%, public administrations 3%, and the consumers only 2%. So this clearly demonstrates that the Nutrivigilance system relies primarily on the active engagement of the industry and of our industry. Second, what types of products are most frequently involved? And so that's the next slide. I'm sorry. So next, what kind of products are involved? Unsurprisingly, food supplements account for 97% of all admissible notifications, while fortified foods represent 2% and foods for specific groups 1%. The report also mentions the purchase location, the place where the food supplements have been purchased. And yeah, the figures seemed quite logical to us, knowing the purchase places where consumers tend to buy their food supplements. So 65% of the cases reported, the purchase location was the pharmacy, in 32% internet, but you know the specificity of Belgium. In those figures, you have also the internet pharmacies, who represents a vast majority of the internet purchases. 2% of the products were bought in food stores and 2% in a parapharmacy. Looking more closely at the food supplements concerned, you see the different categories here on the graph. So the 5 most frequently reported categories were stress and fatigue. They amounted for 15% of the declarations. Multivitamins, 11%. Memory and concentration products, also 11%. Digestive comforts, 8%, and energy products, 8%. So together, these categories represent more than half of all the reported cases, as you can see in the graph. We made a nuance during the presentation because it does not mean that these products are less safe. I mean, it often just reflects their popularity and the number of consumers using them and the increased likelihood of receiving reports in these categories, of course. Let's look at the overall conclusions. So the report recorded 160 declarations in 2025, of which 101 were considered admissible. This corresponds to almost 8 valid declarations per month across the entire Belgian market. So this confirms, in fact, that serious safety issues remain relatively limited, while it highlights the importance of maintaining a good reporting system. Over to Ulrike for a practical update on the use of health claims.
Okay. Yes, a little update on a document that was published at the end of May by the Belgian FPS Public Health. It concerns the 3rd version of the guidance on flexibility in the wording of permitted health claims. Most of the updates of this document concern revisions to legal references because they sometimes need to be updated. But there are 2 important substantive changes that have been introduced and that directly affect product labels, websites, and advertising materials. So these changes, they concern the principles 1 and 10 in the guidelines. So here you have the link to the new version, and I will explain you the 2 principles. So the change in the first principle is about the words promotes, enhances, and optimizes that are no longer permitted. So in the version of 2014 of the guidance, these 3 verbs appeared on the green list as acceptable alternatives to the authorized wording contributes to. You have the list there, draagt bij tot, contribue à, and you have different wordings that you can use or not use. And in the 2026 version, as you see here on the slide, these 3 wordings, they have been removed from the green list and they have been added here to the red list highlighted in yellow. So why these 3 terms? Well, the reason is very specific. The FPS, they received a formal request from the Borderline Commission of the Federal Agency for Medicines and Health Products, the FAGG AFMPS. And in fact, during the assessment of product dossiers, the Commission found that terms such as promotes, enhances, and optimizes, although previously they were considered equivalent, well, in practice they tended to suggest a stronger effect, and in some cases the wording was considered sufficiently strong to risk placing the products in the category of a medicinal product by presentation. So the Borderline Commission therefore requested that the FPS Public Health revise the guidance accordingly, and this has now been done by explicitly moving these terms to the red list. So the message from the Borderline Commission here is very clear. These verbs may push a product across the boundary between a food supplement and a medicinal product, with, of course, all the regulatory consequences possible. So what remains acceptable? You can see it here in green, the alternatives that are acceptable for contributes to, or participates in, plays a role in, supports, intervenes in, helps, contributes to the maintenance of, maintains, and is beneficial for. And what does that mean in practice? Well, that this change, that it means that any communication, whether it is the packaging, the website, advertisements, brochures, social media posts, any communication in which these prohibited terms are linked to an authorized or an on hold claim, will no longer be compliant in the future. And therefore, we advise companies to conduct a review of your existing communication materials and to planify and implement updates wherever and whenever possible. And then the second major change concerns the principle 10 in the guidance document about the proximity rules for general claims, or the so-called eye catchers, and the full specific claim. For those who are familiar with the FPS Public Health FAQ on claims, this change will not come as a surprise, because in June 25, the FPS published a new version of the FAQ, and there was a change in question 5, where they clarified that when a general non-specific health claim is used, well, the corresponding specific authorized claim must appear in the immediate proximity. And the use of asterisks is only acceptable where there is a real lack of space, so it is an exemption and certainly not the rule anymore. And this position, this change in the FAQ, is based on a judgment of the European Court of Justice. And what happened now is that the guidance document itself has already also been updated to reflect both the changed FAQ and the European case law. And just to say that until now and until before the changes of the FAQ, there was a greater flexibility because they only mentioned in the proximity, but now it's in the immediate proximity, and they give more information of what they expect from this wording. So it is a stricter interpretation now. And for websites, the guidance is even more explicit, because on websites there is no lack of space. This cannot be a reason. This reason cannot be invoked to put your specific claim at the bottom of your website in very small with an asterisk. So the use of references such as asterisks or other cross-references should be kept to a minimum, and you should put your general claim and your complete specific claim in the immediate proximity. So in practice, this means for packagings, general claims and full authorized or on hold claims must appear together. They should not be placed on opposite sides of the pack, and asterisks may only be used where there is a real lack of space. And about the use of asterisks, when it is permitted, well, then the asterisk or the reference number must appear at the end of the non-specific claim, and then on the next line, the specific claim must start with this asterisk or the same number. And they also mentioned that small superscript numbers that are hidden within running texts are not acceptable, and that the connection between the general and specific claim must be clear and obvious, so it must be directly seen on your pack. And then, for websites and e-commerce, as I said, no excuses. The full authorized claim should appear directly next or below the general claim. So if you have any questions or doubts regarding specific wordings, claims that can be used, know that you can always contact the be-sup team at info@be-sup.be if you have any questions. So back to Valerie for, I think, the last topic of our webinar.
Yes, yes, indeed. And well, I always like to end with good news. And so I wanted to share some positive news about our legal procedure at the Council of State to ask the annulment of the royal decree of the 14th of December 2024, the one that is now in active and replacing the royal decrees on nutrients, botanicals, and other substances. So you remember maybe that the actual royal decree was published end of 2024, and it has been in force since February 2025. The text contains a lot of legal infringements. Let me briefly remind you the most problematic points. The first thing, which was really a strange point, is that the Belgian authorities changed unilaterally the European definition for food supplements by removing the words concentrated source from the definition. The second infringement was, and this is really a problem in the files of our members, is that the authorities, the Belgian ministry, granted itself the right to refuse notification numbers. This was really a major shift. A notification system should be a notification, a kind of declaration, and not an authorization procedure. However, the royal decree allows now the authority to refuse notification numbers, which means that the procedure is increasingly resembling a market authorization, like for medicines, and that is contrary to the European Directive on Food Supplements. The third point is that the Belgian authorities also restricted the use of mutual recognition and introduced to mandatory approvals for specific product categories. So you might have had the case with mutual recognition. You have a perfectly legal food supplement that is sold, and you can prove that it is commercialized in another country. And then, for example, you cannot, the Belgian authorities refuse you mutual recognition. Well, now they give themselves the right to refuse it. So it's very worrying, of course. So two new obligations have been introduced for food supplements for young children. They must be approved by the Superior Health Council, Conseil supérieur de la santé, de Hoge Gezondheidsraad, and also essential oils in capsules must be approved by the Plant Advisory Committee. So these procedures add complexity, costs, and delays. And again, they move really the notification system closer to a pre-market authorization model. And our legal analysis had shown that the royal decree contained several infringements of the European law. So that's okay. No, I'm sorry. I'm going back. So those infringements included barriers to the free movements of goods, disproportionate administrative burdens for our members, and also unilateral changes to harmonized concepts. And for this reason, be-sup has decided to take action. So we have mandated our legal advisors to file an annulment request before the Council of State, together with Vevia for the fortified foods. This, of course, is a significant financial commitment for be-sup, but it was a crucial step to protect your interests. So the procedure is ongoing, and the good news is that we received the report of the auditor last March, and that this report was positive. So he followed our request for the annulment. So we expect now the judgments and the potential annulments in the second half of 2026. Unfortunately, until the Council of State rules, until the annulment, the royal decree that is actually in force remains into force. And we hope, well, that it will not create too many problems for you. But this would be a major achievement for our members. So before closing today's webinar and answering your questions during the Q&A session that will follow immediately, I would also like to remind you that beyond the dossiers that we presented you today, we remain also active on a lot of other topics that you can see on the screen. And let's give you a good impression of the files that we are following and monitoring for you. And let us now address the questions that we receive. Um, let's go to the chat to look at your questions. Okay. Okay. The first comment is information. So about Garcinia that would also seems to be banned in Poland. Yeah, it's really a trend. So let's wait and see. We have also a question about green tea and green tea extracts containing EGCG. Um, so today, indeed, the limit is 800 milligrams of EGCG and the warnings. Uh, but no, it will not be reduced to 150 milligrams. In fact, we do not know what will be the outcome. What you are referring to, or what the lady that is asking the question is referring to, it was the extract of the novel food legislation, where you had a novel food authorization for green tea with the maximum of 150 milligrams. But so at this moment, what we hear from the Commission is that because the industry did not submit safety data, green tea in EGCG extracts could green tea containing EGCG could be banned, but at this moment we have no idea if a reduced limit would be acceptable. So no, this is not correct. And then we have a question about templates or models for the compliance documents. I suppose that there we are speaking about the compliance documents for PPWR. Yes, indeed. Yeah. We do not have really a model, but we with
No.
the working group it's one of the topics I remember that we decided to work on because I think it would be very helpful for our members, but at this very moment we do not have templates and models. Do you want to add something, Ulrike?
Just some members reported that they received some models from other associations or organizations rather. But indeed, we discussed with the working group that we would have a look at how we could make a model that could best serve our members, but that hasn't been done yet.
Okay, and then I go over to the Q&A session. There is a question about the peel open labels, and if they are accepted for the limited place on the packaging. Yes, they are. So it's a question concerning, for example, the use of German. So one of the solutions that are at this moment accepted by the Belgian authorities, and they even put it in the FAQ about labeling, is the peel off labels. So but what is important to say, you have, if you use them and you use them to, for example, put information, the obligatory information in German, you have to indicate on the visible part of the peel-off, so on the front page of the peel-off label, that for further information in German, you have to go and open the peel-off label. But yes, they are accepted, and it's a solution. Of course, we know that they are very expensive, and also from a sustainability point of view, they could be questionable, but it's a solution indeed. Um, And then there is another question about PPWR, about placing on the market. Um, we put in our slides that it is the transfer of ownership, in fact.
Mhm.
And then there is an example. Um, um, I think that we will come back to the lady asking the question after, because it's really a case by case interpretation, and I think that we will take the time to look at the text, the legal text again, and to give an answer. I prefer giving an answer per email when I'm not really sure. What do you believe, Ulrike?
Yeah, and if it is not clear on how to interpret, we can add this to the questions, our list of questions with uncertainties. Yeah.
Are there other questions? So I think that we addressed them all, but feel free. We still are within the time. So if you have other questions, um, if not, you can also always send us a question after the webinar, like you, and we will be very happy to assist you. And then just some promotion. I do not know if you see my screen because there are some synchronizations issues. Can you see it moving?
I think you have to take control again, Valerie.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Okay, now it's
Okay,
moving.
okay. Just to inform you and to have a look at our upcoming events. So the next big event will be the after summer meeting in September. Oh yes, and for those of you who are attending Nutriform Business Days in France next week, I will be there. So do not hesitate to contact me. We will see each other there, and if you want to make an appointment, we can make an appointment. This is the save the date for the after summer meeting. Registrations will be launched soon. So it will be a very interesting program. We are very glad about it. And of course, already a very early save the date for our Congress of next year. So on behalf of the team, I would like to thank you for your participation and for your continued trust, for your questions. Do not hesitate to ask some more by email, and we wish you a lovely summer. Take care, enjoy the holidays, and we hope to see you again at one of our be-sup events in autumn. Good afternoon. Bye bye.
Bye, see you later.